Welcome to part 3 of my Land Rover Winter Jobs series. If you haven't seen the other films in this series, I'm doing some work to my Land Rover, some upgrades, some maintenance, and lots of fun. We've sorted out the clutch and got the car moving. This time it's all about getting the car to stop. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. I wanted to replace the brakes at every corner of my Land Rover. Also, I'm going to replace the bearings and replace the swivels for the steering. And I wanted to get a shiny new set of brake drums too. Step 1 is to get the wheels off. This Land Rover has old type bearing carriers and wheel nut threads. My new brake drums are not compatible, so I put new bearing carriers on all around as well. A funny feature of my Land Rover wheel nuts is that they're double-sided. I read once this is an old army thing to make changing wheels in the dark easier. That might be an old wives' tale, who knows. I'm going to keep the old bearing carriers and use them on another project. If I give these screws a clean up with a wire brush, hopefully they'll come out easier. They're usually sort of rusted in place. And the same goes for the brake shoe adjusters. I'll get the brake shoes slackened off as much as possible. Often these are completely seized up, but it's best to free them up if you can and keep them in one piece because the replacements are really bad. So I think I had to replace this one on this corner, but I managed to keep the others. Now that the drum's off, I can start to dismantle everything. I'm going to strip everything off from the axle, right up to the axle case itself, because I'm doing the steering as well. Removing the lock nut for the wheel bearings is easy with the special tool. I wouldn't advise using a chisel. That's the bearings and the bearing carrier removed. I don't know what the proper name is for that. Is it bearing carrier? Not sure, but the thing that has the bearings inside it anyway. Old brakes can contain asbestos, so be careful. These brakes are pretty old by the look of them. I'm replacing that brake line. Now I've got the brake backplate off, I can take the swivel apart. I have discovered that this is one of my least favourite jobs to do on a Land Rover, just because they smell so bad. I hate the smell of old EP90. There's the grease. Now I can gently use my ball joint splitter to get the swivel free from the steering linkage. And now I can remove the swivel housing. It was a bit rusty, and the swivels themselves were quite rusty as well. So I thought I'd replace them while I was doing this. You know, if you're going to get this far in, you might as well just go a little bit further. One, two, three. And just like that, as if by magic, the swivel housing is cleaned up and repainted. I gave all of the bits I wasn't replacing a bit of a clean. So it took a while to get all of the bits gathered up together, but now I think I'm ready to rebuild. There's lots of little fiddly bits to remember. Particularly this. Make sure you put that bit on first. It's very easy to forget that. Ask me how I know. I put the Railco bush and the bottom bearing race into the swivel housing, as well as the bearing that goes into the back of the swivel housing. Put a bit of fresh EP90 into the top of that Railco thing there where the pin goes. You can see what I've done wrong. The bearing needs to go inside the bearing race, not float around inside the swivel. It's like watching a monkey try and solve a child's puzzle. After a lot of wiggling, it's on there. I've just got to put that top pin in. Now I did up the seals on the back of the swivel. Don't be like me if you're doing this, and remember to put grease in the seal. I did go back and put grease in there, but when I put it together the first time, I put it together dry. Then I set the steering preload as per the manual. You can see the mark on the fish scale there that we're aiming for.
Oh.
Then after bending the locking tabs over on those nuts, I put the half shaft in. And then after that, I put the freshly cleaned brake backplate on. Here's part of the investment in this project. Nice new bearing carriers. And here's another part of the investment. New freewheeling hubs. I'm excited to try these out. So I'm using a scrap bearing to fit the new bearing race in my ancient press. All proper mechanics and engineers, please look away now. And here comes the grease. After this I thought about investing in one of those cool bearing grease packers, but I probably don't do it enough. And here's the new oil seal. And now the outer bearing can be smushed into place. The oil seal runs up on that little bit of stub axle that sticks out, so make sure that's clean and not all dinged up. You can replace it if you need to. I'm checking with the dial indicator to make sure the bearings have enough end float. There needs to be a little bit. I like to do this frantically and with manic aggression, or as the Green Bible tells you to. Now after everything is all snugged up, I bent the locking tabs over both ways. It has to be done forwards and backwards, otherwise it's not really locking anything. So far this is going basically as expected. There's been no nasty surprises, and I'm not really doing anything complicated. I'm replacing loads of parts, so it doesn't require as much thinking, but yeah, it's going okay so far. So there's no time to rest on our laurels. I've got to put the rest of it together. I got new brake lines, new flexible brake lines, and a new brake slave cylinder. And also the freewheeling hubs have to go on. I've got everything torqued up at lightning speed. And here's the new hub. It's an AVM freewheeling hub. I think you can still get them. I must have got this from Paddocks or Craddocks or JGS 4x4. Who knows? I got it from one of the online places. And now for the brake shoes. Put all the brakes on. The brake shoes go a specific way. They're leading and trailing, and also the springs between the brakes. The spring goes from a peg on the brake plate, not onto the other shoe. Read the manual. That's the only thing I can say. So after I check and double check, the shiny new brake drum can go on. These are supposed to be the best ones you can get. They're from Loff, same place I got my clutch from. And now I'm setting up the brake shoes so that they don't touch the drum. How you do it, you wind them up tight and then back it off until the shoe, you can just hear the shoe touching slightly, and then you know it's all adjusted. And that's the front near side done. I'll fill up the swivel housing and then I'll go do the other side, but I didn't film that because it's exactly the same thing. I got new track rods, new steering linkage. And now I can put the wheels back on, and I can fit new wheel nuts to the new studs. Probably the most excited I've ever been to put wheel nuts onto some studs. Now I'm setting the steering tracking so that they're roughly straight. I will get those aligned at a later date properly. And now, with the front done, without further ado, we move to the back. This is basically the same process, except I don't have to rebuild any steering components, so it's a lot quicker. That's the shaft out, and it seems to be fine, and so did the other side. So now it's the next day, and with the new parts in hand, I can get the rear built up. I had to replace one of the solid Cupro nickel pipes at the back of the car because it was a bit worse for wear, and I also replaced the flexi pipe from the axle up to the chassis, and obviously I replaced the flexi pipes at the front as well. Again, this is all the same process basically, but a lot less fiddling because of all the steering stuff. Also, I've just done the other wheels, so it's a lot faster. And now that's everything basically sewn up. Like with the front, I did the other side as well, but I didn't bother to film it because it's exactly the same. Also, I did torque up the wheels properly as well. I actually fitted some spare wheels I had instead of these ones because I'm going to get new tyres fitted to these wheels. The tyres on these wheels are basically completely knackered. So I've got some Avon Rangemasters to fit to those, which you can't get anymore apparently, but fortunately I had 4 brand new ones just before they stopped selling them. And there she is, back on her wheels with all new brakes and wheel cylinders and steering and everything. I hope that you enjoyed this film, and if you're doing a similar job, I hope this helps you out. In the next one, I'll be finishing everything up with new seats, new seat belts, and lots of other stuff. I hope to see you there. We're one step closer to being back on the road.